Well, good morning. While we're ironing out the final details of having a projector work, let me remind you, please, to turn off your cell phones. That message doesn't seem to get across all the time, so I will repeat it again. Kyle, you can turn off the lights and we'll get started. Last week we looked at a number of cities in Uzbekistan, and then today we're going to continue with Uzbekistan and look at three of the major cities that played important roles in the history of the Silk Road. My two favorite cities in Central Asia are Samarkand and Bukhara, and I think when you look at some of the pictures, you'll see perhaps why I found them so interesting. Just as an overview, the three cities, Samarkand, Bukhara, and Khiva, as I said, major centers on the old Silk Road. Samarkand was Timur's capital, and the buildings there really represent what one could call the epitome of Timurid architecture. Bukhara was a major center of learning, the holy city, and a great rival to Samarkand throughout much of history. And in fact, when we look at the emirates, or the emirate of Bukhara, we'll see that in fact Samarkand was included in that. And then finally, Khiva is a museum city. It's called Museum Under the Stars. And you can call the old city there is probably one of the most homogeneous collections of architecture in the Islamic world. It's a little bit out of the way. So here's where we're going to go today. Here is Tashkent. We're going to go from Tashkent to Samarkand, Samarkand to Bukhara, Bukhara to Khiva, and off we go. Somebody asked me, are there any cars and are there any roads? We're heading now from Tashkent to Samarkand overland, and this is the way I went first time I was there. We drove from Tashkent to Samarkand. Second time I was there, we took this train that I showed you last time. This is the Afrasiab. Goes from Tashkent to Samarkand to Bukhara. It's a high-speed train. It's a Spanish train to go. And this is the Tashkent railway station. So we're getting ready to get on this for about a 3-hour trip to Samarkand. So let's look at Samarkand. Well, here's our friend Timur Tamerlane. This is a statue of him seated, as you can tell, on a throne. This is about 3 times life size, and this greets you as you come into the center of Samarkand. You may recall last week I showed you a picture of a statue of Tamerlane on a horse in Tashkent.
More context. The light seemingly.
So it's not dark enough.
Is the light coming in through that square?
I'll see what I can do.
Here, you go over and talk a little.
So this is that better?
Yes.
Okay. I'm always afraid people are going to fall down, like me. You are now, right. Okay, this is one of the great monumental buildings in Samarkand. This is Bir Emir. This is Timur's tomb. That means tomb of the Emir. And Timur is buried underneath there. This dome is an incredible example of Timurid tile work. That's all tile. An amazing building, and not as cool as some of the things you'll see. You've seen interiors before, and this is the interior of the dome. of Tamerlane's tomb building, and just this profusion of color, gold, turquoise, and purple, again, tile work. Another part of the interior. It's just, it really is spectacular. I don't know, I run out of words to try to.
Is it Arabic?
Is it Arabic?
I mean, I don't, what tradition is it from?
It's Timurid.
Turmeric, I see.
Yeah, it's basically post-Islam. This is from 1400s. So it is Islamic. You'll see in a minute something atypical for Islamic architecture, human figures, but that, yes, it's Islamic. And it's a characteristic. If you notice these blocks like this is a way of going into a dome. It's called a Samarkand, and you'll find these in Islamic architecture of these little cones that seem to come out from the wall. This is the interior. This is Timur Cenotaph. He's buried under there, well, he was buried under there until the Russians took his body out. He was lame, both in the arm and in the leg. This is jade. It has a crack across the top because somebody tried to steal it. They were unsuccessful, but they did manage to crack it. So this is Timur's sarcophagus or cenotaph, and then these are members of his family and also some of his advisors that are buried there with him. So here's the highlight of Samarkand. This is the Registan. This is very close to the tomb that I just showed you. And to me, the term awesome is often overly used, I think. To me, this really is awesome. I've been 3 places that I consider to be awesome: the Grand Canyon, the Terracotta Warriors, and the Registan in Samarkand. Registan simply means square, and around the square, these are madrasas, Islamic schools. You can get an idea of the scale. Here are people. Just absolutely spectacular. Now this was destroyed, so this is a restoration that was done by the Russians. So some of this was standing, but the restorations, if you look back at some of the historical pictures, you will see that to a large degree these buildings were all torn down and then rebuilt during Soviet times. Picture at night. The first time I went there was at night, and as you can see, it's quite spectacular. This is one of the madrasas. This is the one, if you were looking at it from the first view, it's the one off to the left. Ulugh Beg, we'll talk about a little bit later. He was one of Tamerlane's grandsons. But again, the tile work, 2 minarets here, and the dome. Facing that madrasa is the Shirdor Madrasa. Again, similar in structure, but the thing that's particularly interesting here are these figures. Close up, here's what they look like. And question whether these are Caspian tigers, this face, the antelope here. This is very atypical of Islamic architecture because they usually do not show any animals. They'll have floral designs, but no animals. The Islam, as I mentioned last week, the Islam which practiced in Central Asia is a little more loosey-goosey than some other places. A large Sufi influence, and But this is one of the interesting pieces of architecture or architectural details there in the Rajasthan. And this is the third of the madrasas. This is the one that, as we faced it, would be directly in front of us. Again, you know, red tower. And so these are cells for students. If we look at this next one, I think, here's an interior showing the cells. Yeah, Susan?
I'm sorry. I'm almost embarrassed. What's the madrasa?
Okay, I thought I reiterated that, but maybe I didn't. Madrasas are Islamic schools,
That's what I thought.
and they teach not only Islam, but also things like mathematics and so on. It's basically an Islamic school.
But did they explain what was the difference?
I can't hear you, even with the microphone.
Did they explain what was the difference? I mean, what were the different purposes for the three madrasas?
Yeah, they were built by people who wanted to have large. The question was the differences in the madrasas. They were simply built by different people.
No, the purpose.
They all have the same purpose.
What is it?
I said they're Islamic schools.
I know, but I mean, is one for girls or what? I mean,
No, they're all-
what's the difference?
That's the question.
I'm sorry.
The difference is that there are three schools. They teach the same kinds of things. They teach the Quran, they teach mathematics and so on, but they are basically religious schools for young men. Does that help? Yeah, Fran.
Was this whole structure,
Great,
okay,
thank you.
was this whole structure put where it is exactly and the orientation it is with regard to any solar or lunar astronomical stuff, or is it just?
The question, I don't know whether anybody else could hear you, I could barely hear you. The question is the orientation. I don't think there's any orientation. The only orientation that you find is in mosques, where the wall where the imam stands is towards Mecca, and there's a notch there, the mihrab. But these buildings are just oriented that way because I guess they like it.
Thank you.
Yeah, but they're all built by different people, but are around the same time. Is that everybody okay? Joe, did you have a question?
Yeah, are secondary schools?
They are secondary schools, yes. These are for young men. I can't remember the exact ages, but this is where they go to study Islamic, to study the Quran and the Hadiths, the stories of the Prophet. Yeah. Okay. So we okay now? This is another. Let's see. So here's an interior. Now a souvenir shop, but these are all cells. And if you recall, when I talked about Central Asia, I showed you the interior cells that were reconstructed as the way that the students would live.
That looks dirty. Could you go back?
It's gonna be one of those days.
Not
I
everybody
mean,
has heard all of
and I don't
your
mean,
What'd you say,
lascivious
Susan?
or
I
anything.
said, not everyone has heard all of your lectures.
Oh, no,
And
I.
you keep saying,
Yeah.
as I told you, well, we might not remember.
The video won't pick up your voice unless
Oh,
you use
well,
the
that's probably a good
microphone.
thing.
Yeah. Oh, all right.
And your point, Jerry, I'm sorry.
That stuff, to me, it looks really dirty on the ground floor.
Well, it looks to me like water damage.
That's all it is?
I don't know.
Ah, okay.
It's not dirt.
It's not dirty.
It's not dirt. You know. Everything you find, everything there's pretty clean. They keep things clean. Okay. Mausoleums. This is Shahi Zinda Mausoleum. It's actually these are all separate tombs. This is outside of Samarkand. Samarkand, as you can see, is down here, and considered to be some of the best examples of Samarkand architecture anywhere in the world. Great deal of variety. One of these is Muhammad's cousin. It's one of the back ones back. I think that one perhaps. But just great examples of the architecture, the large entry portals. Again, all this is all tile work, brickwork here, and then tile work.
More people, right?
I'm sorry?
How many people?
The question is not many people. Well, lots of times when you take pictures, you don't want to have, you want to be able to see what's there, as opposed to the people. The next one will show you another view. This is one of the holiest places in Central Asia, because of the fact that the Prophet's cousin is buried there. So there are lots of people. This is Ulugh Beg. This is the grandson of Timur. He was a well-known astronomer, leader, and built an observatory on a hill outside of Samarkand. This is reconstructed. You can see this. I'll show you down in here in just a minute. But he carried out a lot of astronomical measurements, determining the size of the Earth and things like that with relatively crude instruments, but he was quite accurate in his assessment. This is a model that shows how they believe the observatory looked, and this would be in the late 1400s. This was a major center of learning, but subsequently, after his death, people didn't believe that science was important, and in fact they were concerned that it contradicted some of the things in the Quran. I know you might find that difficult to believe, that a religious text and science might not be the same, and so that it was the observatory was destroyed.
Oh, wow.
It didn't fall down. It was torn down. But what remained of it that was discovered in, I think, in the late 19th century is this underground track. I have no idea how this works, so please don't ask me. I mean, it's kind of like a sextant buried in the ground. And there must have been something that came up, and it measures the angle of the sun at various times of the day, and that's how these guys work their magic. And maybe Jerry can give a lecture on it, but I can't. Now, before Samarkand was Samarkand, there was a major city on a hill overlooking the valley, a site called Afrasiab. That's where the name comes for the train. This was the historical capital of this part of the country, or the world, before the city of Samarkand was constructed. So this is the archaeological site. It has a great museum. There's current archaeological excavations underway, as well as excavations that were carried out by Soviet scientists earlier in the 20th century. These are ossuaries where bones are buried. The Zoroastrian religion, which was prevalent here before Islam. Bodies are not buried. They're put on towers, and then the flesh is taken off by birds. They pick up the bones a few years later or a year later and put them in these boxes. So this is an ossuary. You can see some pottery here. But the thing that the site is best known for are these murals. And what they've done is the excavations, they took out the murals and then, yeah, you're looking for something? Hello? they put the murals up in the museum in the same positions that they were in the original site. And these are fresco murals. This is one that shows foreign envoys coming to Afrasiab, and you can see these people have different hairstyles, different costumes that suggest that they're from different parts of the world. These dates, I think, if I remember right, about 900. This is one that's purported to show a princess bride here with her entourage here and the geese. So this is not Islamic. So let's leave Samarkand. Any questions? Anything that I didn't punt before? Yeah, Tom.
How many trips did you make to that area?
How many trips did I make? I made 2. One in 2014 and one in 2018. So all 3 of these cities that I'm talking about today, I visited both times. Yeah. There's a question in the back, I think, Kathy. You want to give her
Did you say?
And that awesome site, the big square, you said it had been destroyed and then rebuilt.
Right.
Who destroyed it?
That's a good question, and I don't know. I mean, some of it just fell down over time.
It sounded like they'd been attacked or
I'm
something.
trying to think whether Genghis Khan came in. It might have been destroyed by, no, Genghis Khan was before Tamerlane. So I'm not sure. I really don't know. Sorry. Yeah, Al's got a question.
The murals look like they're slabs of stone, is that correct?
No, it's fresco on plaster.
Say again, please?
It's fresco. It's painted, they're painted on plaster.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Plaster. Bukhara. So here's the kind of the characteristic site that represents Bukhara. This is the Kalan Mosque complex. Mosque here, tower here, madrasa here. View from a slightly different angle. And we're going to come back to the tower, the minaret, just a minute. But this is in the heart of Bukhara. One of the things that's interesting in Bukhara, and I think is perhaps unique, although maybe not, is what are called the training domes. And the training domes were constructed where the various routes from the Silk Road came together. And they constructed these domes, and then inside here you can see this, there's the road coming in this way, path coming in this way, one over here, and they constructed these quite unusual domes. This is the interior. This shows a bazaar in one of the training domes. So here's the dome here. And you'll see one of the things that Bukhara is famous for is metalworking, knives, and you'll see people making knives in the shops here. A lot of very interesting craftsmanship. You've seen this before, but just this is, you can see here, a road coming in this way, and one coming in this way, and then this guy right in the middle with some of the characteristics of fabrics that we see in Uzbekistan.
How many people would be traveling this route?
How many people would be traveling on this route through these towns to town?
How many people would be traveling? I have no idea. I mean, some of the caravans would have over 100 camels. But in terms of history, I mean, this was a major trade center, so you've got people coming in from the north, from the south, from the east and the west. There'd be hundreds of people. But I don't,
Every day,
I'm sorry.
hundreds every day.
Yeah, it was a major trade route. Yeah. This is an interesting building. This is the Chor Menorah. That means 4 minarets. And there apparently used to be a mosque behind it. But this is again a building that's often used to represent Bukhara because it's different than most architecture. This is we have to have a token camel. This is the Ark Fortress and the walls of the old citadel in Bukhara. This was where the emir lived, and it is basically inside it is a palace, highly well fortified. This is the entrance to the Ark, a ramp walkway here, and then we go in through here and into the palace, the citadel and the palace itself. This is the emir. He's the last emir of Bukhara. Bukhara was important throughout the history of the Silk Road, but also played a key role in the activities of the Great Game, that jostling between Britain and Russia for control of access to South Asia. This is the last emir. I think he was emir during the time of the Russians, and I think he was deposed in the early 1920s. Yeah.
So that fort that you showed on the previous slide was pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Who were they defending themselves against that required that?
The Russians, the Mongols, the other khanates. There are 3 major khanates. Those are political organizations, like states, Khiva, Kokand, which is in the Fergana Valley, and Bukhara. They were subject to being attacked by the nomadic peoples of the steppes, people coming down across the steppes, the nomadic peoples. There was constant warfare throughout Central Asia and most of the history. One of the issues of the Silk Road was providing protection for travelers from bandits. So there was a lot of fighting going on. And that's,
But why do you need such strong walls?
oh God. I guess any place you look at a fortress, you've got strong walls. I mean, you look in England, you look in France, you look.
Yeah, but I have no idea what weaponry was used against these guys. I think of bows and arrows.
They use siege engines,
Ah.
catapults, siege engines, towers. They run a tower up against the wall. To think about the history of the defeat by the Turks of the forces in Constantinople. They had bombs. Keep in mind, we're talking about now. This is in the 1600s. So gunpowder had been around a long time. So we had bombs. People would try to get under and blow the walls up. Most of the time, in most countries, a citadel will be on the hill. Well, here, you don't have a good hill like you do in other places. So they built strong walls.
So are those minarets built into the wall?
No, it's just a gate. Just a gate. Yeah.
How long would it take to build such a thing? Anybody have any idea?
Somebody may, but I certainly don't. No, I don't. I really don't. I'm sorry. No. I mean, this is massive. Let me go back. You get an idea. I don't know how many square meters this is, but it's a very imposing building. So there's the Emir. Here's the Emirate. This is about 1900. So this is the time that he came under Russian protection. And so here is the Emirate of Bukhara here. So it included Samarkand, which is over here. Bukhara would be here. This is the Khanate of Khiva here. And it doesn't show the Khanate of Kokand, but it was a large area. And he was basically the prince of that area, the Emir. This is the interior of his palace. So once we get through that, up those stairs and into that gate, this is some of the cells for servants in the palace. There's a dungeon right when you first come in. The throne room. This is one of the rooms in the palace. This is in the throne room. You can see again this splendid Islamic architecture. Now, I mentioned the importance of Bukhara during the Great Game. In the mid-1800s, a couple of Brits found their way in disguise to Bukhara, and the Emir decided that they were persona non grata. He kept them around for a while, and then they threw him in here. This is in the prison, the jail in Bukhara. Zindan is the name of the prison. It's a bug pit, and it's about 15, 20 feet deep, and basically they were at the bottom of that along with rats. Bugs, their food was thrown down to them. After a while, the Emir decided that he'd had enough of that, so he took them out, and following the tradition in Bukhara, wrapped them in carpets, took them up to the top of the minaret and threw them off. And that was the end. And it's referred to the Kalan minaret, or the Tower of Death. And they weren't the first people. That was one of the things that the Emir liked to do, was to get rid of some of his foes. So that's the bug pit and the minaret. So this is, now I'm going back to the ark to show you something else. It opens into the Registan. Remember I said Registan was a square. So the Khan lived in here. His mosque is across the street. I'll show you in a minute. So they would roll the red carpet down all the way here, across the square, which we're talking probably 300 or 400 meters to here. This is the Bukhara Mosque. This was the Emir's mosque, and interesting woodwork, tile work here. But this is the entrance to the mosque. Once you take a look here, some of the detail of the wood. This is Makettery here. Put an ornate carving. So this was the Emir's mosque, and he got there by walking down the red carpet that went from the ark. This is an area called Labai Huz. Huz means pond, and historically in Bukhara there were hundreds of these ponds, which unfortunately were places for breeding of malarial mosquitoes. And also schistosomes, and so they filled them all in. They left this one, which is kind of in the heart of Bukhara. This is a Sufi madrasa here, but this is this large pond. What's really great about it is it's kind of a gathering place for camels. and a gathering place for cafes, cafes around the edges, and most importantly, a gathering place for old men. You see playing chess here. This is basically a chacabana, a tea house. This means around, so this is around the pond. And here you can see the water. You see the typical Uzbek caps. Those are similar to what we saw in the Uyghurs in Kashgar. And then adjacent to that is a madrasa where they have entertainment, folk dancers. The second time I was there, I went specifically because it was a Silk and Spices festival, and so they had dancers all around the city, all music. I danced several times. That was an event. I was actually on TV, not dancing. I was on YouTube dancing. It was fun because I was there with a Uzbek travel company, and they had arranged for, I think there were 12 of us, to be dignitaries. And so we got to ride in these little things like golf carts at the head of the parade. And if I had my pictures, you could see the parade, but I don't have my pictures. So I'll just have to talk a little bit about the folk dancers. But you can see the costume, very, very colorful, and just amazing. So, as I say, the reason I was there the second time, well, the thing that determined when I was there was the Silk and Spices Festival with lots of music, lots of silk and lots of spices. Here you can see some people from University House, Bukhara. Very colorful ikats, very colorful. Most of these women probably have gold teeth. If you've traveled in that part of the world, you will see that people like to have show that they have nice teeth that are gold, and probably most of these women did. This is a monument to Hoja Nazarene, who was a folk hero, a holy fool. This shows him. This is the statue, and if you rub the donkey's ears, that's supposed to bring you good luck. So you can see this little polish. So this is basically, there's a madrasa right back here. The place I showed you where the folk dancing was right in this building right back here. And as they say, a holy fool or a folk hero of the Uzbek people. This is an interesting building. This is another mausoleum. This is built out of brick. Very interesting brickwork here. This survived Genghis Khan because it was buried. So you get an idea of how much sand there must have been for this to be buried. And then it was subsequently dug up. But Genghis Khan, when he came in, basically destroyed Bukhara, but this building survived. So, questions about Bukhara? It was important from the point of view of a center of religious learning, Samarkand more for science, Bukhara for religion. And as I said before, it competed with Samarkand as the capital, and it then became, during the Khani, it controlled Samarkand from there, and that was in the 1800s. Everybody okay? Okay, so let's go to Khiva. This is on the outside of Khiva, just to show you, give you the picture. Tashkent is here, Samarkand is here, Khiva is here. Here's the Aral Sea that we talked about last week. So it's on the kind of northern. This is the Caspian Sea, a northern route that goes up here into Kazakhstan and then down across the Black Sea. This would be Crimea here, Black Sea, Crimean Sea, and the Aral Sea. So this is pushing the Silk Road. This is a map showing what's called Kala, the old city, and surrounded by walls for protection. Again, this is an oasis city, so it's not on a hill. So you have these large walls around the old city. And as I said in the introductory slide, some of the greatest collection of homogeneous architecture anywhere in Central Asia. Just as the Tower of Death, minaret, was one of the key symbols of Bukhara, this minaret is characteristic of Khiva. It was never completed. This is all tile work. You get an idea of the size. These are here's people. It was supposed to would have been, if it had been completed, the tallest minaret in Central Asia. This is the map that I just showed you. So coming into the old city, the Kalfa Menor, that's the tower here. This is the Khan's palace. Khan was a step above an emir in terms of political organizations. It's a little hard sometimes to figure out exactly how these terms are used and how they differ. But this is the Khan's palace here, which you'll see better in just a minute. This is an aerial view. We're going to come back. Here's the minaret here. We're going to come back and look at this in just a minute. But it's an oasis city. It's in the middle of the desert. To get there, you can take the train, or you can go overland, which is what I did. The first time I was there, I went from Turkmenistan south into Khiva. The second time I was there, I went from Bukhara to Khiva by road across the desert. I meant to mention in talking about Bukhara, when the Russians came in, they tried to get along with the emir. And he, as I said, traditionally they were not nice guys. And so when the Russians wanted to build a railroad, he would not let them build the railroad into the city of Bukhara. So when you take the train from Samarkand to Bukhara, you end up not in Bukhara itself, but in a little town about 12 miles away, or 12K away, 7 miles away, because that was the closest that the emir would let the Russians get in negotiating to build the railroad. So here's Khiva, an aerial view. This is all inside that wall that I showed you on the introductory slide. Here's the citadel, the Ark in Khiva, and this is that abbreviated minaret. Just again, I kind of extol the virtues of the tile work there, but it really is spectacular. And the banding, this is all. I'm trying to remember about how it's probably about 25 to 30 feet across at the base, and probably about 70 feet high, and it would have been much higher than that if they'd finished it. I think they ran out of money or men or something. I'm not sure. Just another view of it. Here you can see again the wall of the Ark. These are Uzbek textiles. These are called suzannes. They are embroidery work. So these patterns are embroidery and then a fabric overlay. And I'm not sure. Can't remember what the term is for it. But you take a piece of fabric and material and sew it on top of another piece. It's like a mola, if you're familiar with molas in Central South America. But these are very characteristic of Uzbekistan. This is the madrasa. These would be cells. Here again, you see the minaret. Just a very large madrasa right there in the heart of Khiva. This is the courtyard of that madrasa, and you see the posts like we saw at the mosque in Bukhara, and these are now souvenir shops, souvenir stalls, and there are people. This is the mausoleum of a guy, Adlan Muhammad, who was a fascinating character. He was a wrestler, he was a writer, he was a philosopher, and I think died in the 1600s, 1700s maybe. This is his mausoleum. These are our tombs outside the mausoleum. But the interior of the mausoleum, here's his tomb. This is actually behind the gate. There's a fence in front, so you don't get exactly this view because there's a fence there. So that's where I took this picture. But so this is him, or his remains are in there. They have his dates there. This is the ceiling. And then finally, this is the Juma, or the Friday mosque in Khiva. There are called about 200 of these posts. They sit on a base. There's a metal base here that protects them from getting wet, absorbing moisture from below. The carving on them these are all cedar logs. Someone said that they came from northern India. I don't know whether that's true or not. Not cedar, I'm not sure what the wood is. Cypress, not cedar. But you can see the ornate detail in the carving of these. And these support the mosque itself. So, in summary, 3 cities, Samarkand, Bukhara, Khiva, major centers in the old Silk Road, all 3 of them. Samarkand was Timur's capital, and the buildings there, such as Rajasthan, I didn't show you Badi Kanam, the mausoleum that Timur built for his wife, but that's another great example of Timurid architecture, and the Gurir Timur, his mausoleum. Bukhara was a major center of learning, particularly for the Sufi religion. I didn't talk that much about it. Sufism was a branch of Islam. They believe in saints, and if you're familiar with the whirling dervishes in Turkey, those are Sufis, considered by some the Islamic groups. They are infidels. But Sufism was major importance in Bukhara. I didn't talk that much about it, but the mathematics, medicine, major leaders in the Silk Road times there in Bukhara. And then Khiva, the museum city, with the Khalidul city, this collection of architecture in the Islamic world. And so with that, we can turn on the lights, and I will try to answer any questions. Yeah, Karen, if you take the mic back to Joe, and then turn on the lights while you're back there, that'd be great.
Okay,
I was wondering if the mosques are filled with worshipers, or whatever you call it in that religion, today, or are these just sort of empty relics of the past?
These are, for the most part, active mosques. They will be filled on Friday, or fewer people during the prayers during the week. But on Friday, in the Friday Mosque Juma, those are the big mosques. Those are the ones where the imams give fiery sermons, and they will be filled. Okay. I saw a hand. Yeah, Mike. Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Betty Ann.
In the towers where they call to prayer, I don't see any openings on the top where normally you would hear the call to prayer.
Can't hear the lady.
Okay, I'll repeat the question. She says she didn't see any openings in the towers for the call to prayer. If I were to go back to the Bukhara, when you would see that there's in fact open windows around there. Now the call to prayer is recorded. You don't see hear the live mezzanines. But traditionally, all of these would have openings. The one in Khiva didn't get built all the way. So I mean, that's why it looks like a silo as opposed to a minaret. But most of the minarets at the mosques will have openings. They have stairways up where the mezzanine would go up. Now, as I say, they're recorded. There's a question up here, Sharon. Yes.
The photographs that were
Close to your
areas,
Close to your mouth, please.
close to my mouth.
Yeah.
The photographs that are aerial shots, were you taking flights or are they postcards or what's the source?
I need to reiterate this. None of these are my pictures. I can't find my pictures. These are all the ones I got off the web, which makes it much more flexible, but you won't see me in them. I was really there, contrary to public opinion. So these are all basically off the web. These are all places I've been, but that's why people ask, well, why aren't there any people? Well, because a lot of these are professional photographers, where they keep the people away. That's a good question. I need to make that clear. That I did not fly. I did not have a drone. That's somebody else's picture. I have to tell you a little story. I took some courses at Osher Institute, Lifelong Learning Institute in Atlanta, at Emory, and there was a woman who taught or gave courses on travel, like one on the Balkans. I did about 3 of them. She had never been to any of the places she talked about. She had not been to one of the places. I don't think she'd been out of the United States, but she was interested enough. She developed and did a very good job of teaching it. But at least I have been these places. These aren't my pictures. If you want to see my pictures, they're in books upstairs. I can't find the discs or the books. Yeah, Paul?
Well, if you ever do.
The sort of buildings that you showed are madrasas, mosques, and such. There must be other buildings too, government buildings, military buildings, residentials. Did you not want to include them, or are they just not there?
Oh no, they're there. There are people. There are actually people who live in these places. This question that came up, I think it was maybe last week as well. What I tried to do was I tried to pick out pictures that illustrated to me which are one of the key things in each of the cities or in the countries. There are people. There are people, and you will see next week when I talk about Turkmenistan, I'll show you apartment blocks if you want to see where people live. But what I've tried to do with this is to really point out some of the real treasures, if you will. There are people, there are cars, there are streets, there are people who are going to work every day. They're not all souvenir shops. I could have showed you a grocer. I've shown you markets where people shop. But in terms of everyday life goes on. And I just decided not to show you a house in the alleyway, although I did that in Cashmore. But your point's well taken. There are people, there are cars, and there are houses. Yes, Fred?
I see in your summary the past tense that They were major centers, was a major center of learning and so on. How are they today? Are they still a major center of learning in that area?
Not so much, because learning is more dispersed. So you don't have everybody having to go to one place to study the Quran or whatever. So that's a very good point. There were major centers for Silk Road trade. Tashkent is now a major center for business. The others are towns that, to a large degree, both Bukhara and Khiva are highly dependent on tourist traffic, both internal and external. So your point's well taken. They're still there. They just have a different economic base than they did in the past. We got Al, and then over there, and Jerry.
Okay. Did you have an opportunity to go to any of the people's homes other than the tourist guides?
No, we did not. I did in China. We had a home-hosted meal in Kashgar, but in Central Asia, I always ate in restaurants. Good question.
The era when all of this stuff was being built, in that period, the Muslims were way ahead of the Europeans in learning and mathematics and science, all that good stuff.
Yes.
But a question, in the madrasas, you showed cells, and they all looked open. Was there any closed space for the students?
They may have had curtains on them. I don't know historically what it was like. You raise a good point about how far ahead this was. Starting in September, we've got one of the great courses on the Islamic Golden Age. And we'll get into, this is kind of a continuation of Rudy's big history. You may recall I sent out a survey and asked what people might be interested in. So starting in September, I'll do a series, the taped lectures. And this is not the lecture that you saw before you didn't like, by the way. For those of you that didn't care for the professor, it'll be on the Islamic Golden Age. It'll talk about mathematics, science, and medicine, as well as literature. Yeah, Jerry.
Yeah,
My geography isn't good enough to know were these cities under Russian control for a while? Soviet control, I should say.
Yeah, I don't. The answer is yes.
Yeah. And how tolerant were they of Islam?
Well, they weren't.
Yeah.
They're still not that tolerant of it. It's come back. But all of these, let me go back a step. All of the stands that I've talked about were republics in the Soviet Union. So once the Soviet Union broke up, they became independent countries. But Kazakhstan was at one time the Kazakh Republic in the Soviet Union. The Russian influence here began pre-Bolshevik, but clearly following the Russian Revolution, it changed, and there was if you get into the political history of this, these were important places for Russian power. I pointed out how this was, in terms of the Great Game, the importance of Russian influence. So all these basically were at one time controlled by Russia. They break up the Soviet Union, and they became individual republics. And the borders between the republics, as I pointed out, I think last time, were sometimes drawn in funny ways, but they relate to who lives where. So. Is that enough?
Anyone else?
Yeah, go ahead. More one, or as many more as we need.
Yeah, stump the speaker.
Is cotton still grown?
Yes.
In Uzbekistan?
Yes. The answer is the question is cotton still grown in Uzbekistan? The answer is yes. They've kind of gotten away from conscripted labor to picket. When I was there, when I was driving through the cotton fields, remember the little song, "Cotton fields get rotten, you can't pick very much cotton." When I was driving through the cotton fields, you were not allowed to take pictures of the cotton harvest because they didn't want people on the outside to know that 10-year-old kids were working in pesticide-laden cotton fields. So it's still a major, I think it's the second, for Uzbekistan, I think it's the second largest export. Petroleum is number one, I think. Thank you. So we'll wrap this up. Next week we'll go to Turkmenistan, which is the one that probably, well, maybe some of you have been there, but it's not on the beaten path anymore. Thank you.